I'll mute everyone and then you can unmute and
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah, good evening to all of you. I think at the outset I must thank all of you because despite the lockdown, to come on a Sunday, that too at 5 o'clock in the evening, I think it's a great thing. I'm extremely grateful to all of you for two things. One is for giving this opportunity to me to talk on this particular topic on anti-profiteering and the GST. And I was, as I was telling Ramesh, a little apprehensive because I know it's a very knowledgeable group, but I still decided that I would venture into this topic. One thing very interesting you'll find is this topic, anti-profiteering, is something which none of us have encountered in any tax law in India till date. It's for the first time that we are encountering it in the GST. So I'll also be taking you through the provisions as also what is the international practice. But before that, I'll just start off with a small illustration. See, on 28th of October 2017, one person went to Domino's Pizza. He ordered a medium pan pizza. Let us say the price was 300 rupees. And the GST on 28/10/2017 was 18%. So he charged 354 rupees. The person paid, ate the pizza and went home. On 15th of November 2017, the rate of GST on restaurant services was reduced from 18% to 5%, with a further condition that there will be no input tax credit. This person went on 20th November to the same Pizza Hut and had another same medium pan pizza he had. The price, let us say, was 320 rupees and a 5% GST was charged, which is 16 rupees. So he paid 336 rupees, which was less than the 354 rupees which he paid earlier, but now it is 336. This person came back, studied section 171 of the GST Act and said the price should have been 300. 5% GST means 315. I should have been charged only 315 rupees, whereas I had been charged 336 rupees. So the difference is an profiteering by Domino's Pizza. He lodged a complaint which resulted in an investigation and resulted in the determination that Domino's Pizza across India had benefited to the extent of 41 crores in violation of the anti-profiteering requirement under section 171 of the GST Act. This is one illustration I have given just to start what is the flavor of what we are getting into. With the introduction of GST, we had the section 171. Coupled with that, we have certain rules in chapter 15 of the CGST rules, together constitute a code on anti-profiteering. And why this has come and how long it is likely to do and what are the types of problems that this mechanism has created in the GST is the subject of this particular talk. Yeah, before I go to the actual provisions, I just wanted you to know what was the need for the anti-profiteering. The first thing all of you would note, I don't know whether many of you have studied it or not, the general consensus is whenever a country has introduced for the first time GST, there has been an increase in the inflation, creating an economic problem for the party in power. And the other observation is most of the parties which have introduced GST have lost power in the subsequent election. And most of them would say they will introduce GST during the middle of their term so that it has time to take by itself and settle it so that they don't lose an election. That is the type of study. And in order to overcome this type of inflation, etc., one of the methods which had been introduced by various countries when they implemented GST for the first time was to have this anti-profiteering provision. When we introduced in 2017 and when we had, for example, the draft law in 2016, the nearest equivalent of GST being introduced was in Malaysia in 2015, where also they had an anti-profiteering mechanism, a far more, I would say, complicated mechanism than what we have. And that 2015 originally to continue till for 3 years is still continuing. And Australia also had a similar GST provision because it started around 2010 implementation of the GST. And the earliest one was like 1986 when Canada introduced GST also, they had this provision. So in order to ensure that introduction of the GST does not result in a runaway inflation creating problem for the economy and also for the party in power, one of the mechanisms thought of was this anti-profiteering mechanism, which is generally to be only a very, very temporary measure. Even in India, it started off as a temporary measure for 2 years. Now it has been extended. We will see how long is it likely to continue. Is it likely to be perpetual? We will see it in the course of the presentation. And other thing we did, when VAT was introduced, replacing the sales tax, it was found that inflation had increased from 4.3% in 2005. And as you know, 2006-07, when VAT was introduced, it increased to 6.4%. And there was also a study of short-term spike in inflation in Malaysia in 2015 and Canada as well in 1986. Then, of course, is the report of the Control and Auditor General of India on the implementation of VAT in 2010, when the CAG, after studying it, found despite the credit mechanism being made available under the VAT in a far more extensive way than it was under the sales tax regime, people benefited, but many of them did not pass on the benefit to the consumers, which was what was the whole intention of the indirect tax. Finally, the buck will stop with the consumer, but what he will, whatever benefit is required to be passed on has not been passed on. And the CAG had quantified at that point of time the benefit as about 140 crores was not passed on. So what you generally say is the general increase or an apprehension that inflation will increase, and the whole thing is a beneficial provision. Therefore, the benefit must be passed on. And the international experience is what prompted, I would say, the central government to have Section 171 on anti-profiteering. This is the background to Section 171. The entire code for the anti-profiteering is simply one section, which is Section 171 of the CGST Act. And as I said, you have Chapter 15, which talks from Rules 122 to 137. Therefore, we are simply talking about 16 rules which cover this entire full code of the anti-profiteering mechanism. And till today, I think more than 125 orders have been passed by the National Anti-Profiteering Authority, NAPA. And of course, a number of cases are still under investigation. We are going to see how the investigation is being done, what types of findings are made, where the problems, etc. We will see them during the course of the presentation. So the law as such is only going to be this much and nothing more. And in fact, I'm not even going to deal with the rules. Most of it will be contained in Section 171 only. Now, this is Section 171. Section 171.1 is the most important for us. All that the law says is any reduction in the rate of tax on any supply of goods or services or the benefit of input tax credit shall be passed on to the recipient by way of commensurate reduction in prices. So we have two items. There is a reduction in the rate of tax on a supply, or there is a higher benefit of input tax credit. If these two are made available in the GST, then it must be passed on to the recipient by way of a commensurate reduction in prices. So one of the interpretations is what is meant by commensurate reduction in prices. In the pizza example, which I started off, should the price have remained at 300 only and the tax is 5%, it should have become 315. Then and only then is it a commensurate reduction in prices. It appears so from the pizza example and the decision of the NAPA. We will see that as we go further. So the Section 171.1 is the real crux of the anti-profiteering measure. Then 171.2 The central government may, on the recommendation of the council, for GST council, by notification constitute an authority. This authority is the National Anti-Profiting Authority, about which I spoke in the previous slide, or empower an existing authority. It need not constitute new one. It could have given to the Director General of Trade Remedies in the Ministry of Commerce also, but they have created a new authority. Constitute an ILA for the timing to examine whether input tax credit availed by any registered person or the reduction in the rate of tax actually resulted in a commensurate reduction in the price of goods or services or both. So this is the provision by which 171(1), whether it is implemented properly, etc., is seen through 171(2). 171(3) is, of course, the authority shall exercise such powers and discharge such functions as may be prescribed, which is what is contained in chapter 15 of the CGST rules. Then you have a subsection 3A, which was brought in by Finance Act 2019, where the authority referred to in subsection 2, after holding examination as required under said subsection, comes to the conclusion that any registered person has profiteered under subsection 1, such person shall be liable to pay penalty equivalent to 10% of the amount so profiteered. This is important because through this, they have restricted the power of the NAPA to impose the penalty, and they have specified that penalty should be equal to 20%. And a further proviso that the penalty is not leviable if the profiteered amount is deposited in 30 days of the date of passing of the order of the authority. And then, of course, for the purposes of this section, the expression profiteered shall mean the amount determined on account of not passing the benefit of reduction in rate of tax on supply of goods or services, or both, or the benefit of input tax credit to the recipient by way of a commensurate reduction in the price of the goods or services, or both. Explanation is similar to section 171 as you see. Therefore, one is there a reduction in the rate of tax? And when you are talking about the reduction rate of tax, it can be one, prior regime, prior to GST versus GST. It can also within GST, if something is 28% today and tomorrow it gets reduced to 18%, even that would come within that. And any additional input tax credit which you are not getting either under the old regime or even the GST you are not getting, but you are now given that input tax credit. These are the two constituents for invoking this, and the explanation simply brings out that. So now what we are going to see is how this is being implemented. I think that's going to be the crux of the coming presentation. Now have a look at this. On the left hand side, you see reduction in rate of tax. The first is there is a reduction in GST rate compared to pre-GST rate. So you have a GST rate which is 18%, say, less than the excise, let us say 12.5%, and VAT was 14.5%, say. So it was almost 28% earlier. Now it has come down to 18%. This is a situation warranting application of section 171. Similarly, GST rate being less than the service tax rate. So you are paying service tax at 15%, and now GST is 12%. There is a reduction, again warranting application of section 171. So that is with reference to pre-GST regime. Now the next one is reduction under the GST regime. This is where I talked about the restaurant services. Originally it was 18%, then it became 5% from 15/11/2017, but with a condition, no input tax credit. Therefore, you have two elements. One is there is a reduction of 13%, but there is a loss of input tax credit. So what is the effect of that offset, and what is the extra benefit you are getting or not getting? That is what will be hit by section 171. Similarly, from 1/4/2019, you know, for the construction services, you talked about two different categories of construction, affordable and non-affordable, and then you have a rate with input tax credit and a rate without input tax credit. So these are the types of reductions in rate which are taking place under the GST regime. One thing you will notice, of course, is we have now 5 slabs of rate of taxes, and there is still a talk that it must be further reduced to maybe 2 or 3, etc. So if and when there is a further reduction in the GST rate, this could also trigger 171. And another instance is when the petroleum products which are kept out of GST, if and when they are brought in, and if input tax credit is given, then again you will have a situation where 171 may become applicable. So these are two broad situations when section 171 will be triggered. Now we come to benefit of input tax credit, which is on the right hand side of your screen. First is, of course, CST was earlier not available as a benefit, as you all know, because tax is paid in the originating state, and the tax is paid by the person in the consuming state, and the consuming state does not get the tax, obviously question of payment, giving credit will not have it. Now we don't have the concept of CST, but even now when you're talking about even a stock transfer, let's say from Chennai to Telangana, a tax is payable, but then it is an IGST. The IGST, the SGST component of Telangana component, therefore it is paid to Telangana, therefore you are eligible to take the credit. So CST benefit elimination is one situation where you are going to get a benefit of input tax credit. In the earlier regime, if you have a substantial procurements which are based on interstate purchases and therefore you are not getting the CST benefit, in the GST regime, you will be getting the benefit of this higher input tax credit, again warranting section 171. Similarly, entry tax and octroi, the credit was not available in the earlier regime. Now all of them get subsumed in the GST, therefore you will be able to get extra credit. Then service benefits for service providers, purely service providers. When you are trading in goods, it was treated as a service, but an exempted service, which means you are not eligible for input tax credit. Now, under the GST, even trading of goods is a service. There is no exemption. Therefore, you are able to take credit of the input tax of the inputs which you purchase, and when you sell, you can do that. Therefore, you get an extra benefit there. Similarly, when goods are purchased by service providers, they were not getting VAT credit, but now that benefit is also available. Similarly, on capital goods, which are used by the various service providers, that credit was not available. That again will be available. These are the types of situations where you can now see higher benefit of input tax credit being available under the GST. And the purpose of 171 is whatever is the extra benefit you are getting through this, you must pass on to the consumer. How long should you pass on? Are you not allowed to revise the prices at all at any point of time? And if you are revising prices, what type of evidence you have? I think these are the contentious issues which are going to be in section 171. Very quickly, you can see the major demands. Unilever has a 535 crore demand because they have a fast-moving consumer goods, lot of goods with MRP, where MRP was not revised when the rate of tax was reduced, and the same MRP was maintained. They have a very big demand of 535 crores. Domino's Pizza, I was talking about 41 crores. Nestle has 90. Procter & Gamble is 250 crores. Patanjali is 75 crores. McDonald's 7.5 crores. I'm just giving a major demand. For example, Unilever, all the Procter & Gamble, all of them are also in the Delhi High Court. And then from the Delhi High Court, many of them have traveled to the Supreme Court with reference to constitutionality. I'll come to that later. So you have, as I said, 125 orders have been passed and more investigations are still in the pipeline. Therefore, this is again a very, very major issue. Having looked at section 171, very quickly let us look at what is the institutional framework. This is coming from the rules. I'm going from the bottom of the pyramid. At the lowest level is what we call the state level screening committee. So you take Tamil Nadu, you see I am a consumer, I am the one who went to the Pizza Hut and had a pizza, and I find that I have been short charged. Then I can go and complain to the state level screening committee. That's one point. Then there is a provision for constituting a standing committee by the GST Council. And then, of course, you have Director General of Anti-Profiteering, just like you have the Director General of Investigation Registration under the earlier regime for company law. He will do all the investigation, consider the arguments, consider all the evidences, papers, etc., and determine whether 171 has been complied with or not. If not complied with, what is the amount which has not been complied with? All that fully decides whether section 171 has been violated, if so, to what extent, and how should the situation be rectified. So this is the broad hierarchy. There is no provision for appeal from the order of the NAPA. Therefore, most of it is going only by means of writ to Delhi High Court, if you Bombay High Court, etc. No appellate authority at all. So this is the general institutional framework. Yeah. Yeah, now you can see the National Anti-Profiteering Authority. Sorry? Am I audible? Is there any problem? Okay.
You are perfect, sir. You are perfect, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, very good. So if I am very fast or something, please let me know, because I know you all may be able to follow quickly. Therefore, I'm going a little fast, but I think that should not be a problem.
Correct,
No, sir, it's very clear, sir. It is very clear, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Now,
you.
this National Anti-Profiteering Authority is actually is a body of 5 people, and you will find the chairman is a person who has been a secretary to the Government of India, and there are 4 technical members, and all these 4 technical members are coming from either the commissioners of state tax or central tax. So you will find a NAPA which is absolutely nobody from the judicial side. And this committee is constituted by the GST Council. So there also, even in the selection of the members, there is no judiciary or anyone being there. So this is actually a major point of challenge now pending before the Supreme Court. So whether this is even correct, especially of course our Madras High Court decision, which is went to Supreme Court, that is still being cited here in this case, and I will come to that also slightly later. So the constitution is 1 + 4 members. The quorum is minimum 3. Less than 3, of course, cannot hear, but you have a situation where 3 people here and 4 people sign the order. Despite 70 years of all these things, people still continue to do those fundamental mistakes. They continue to happen. So this is the constitution of the National Anti-Profiteering Authority. Now, when we talked about the benefit, how it should be passed on, consider from the left-hand side, there is a supplier. And on the right-hand side, there is a consumer. And one in the green you'll see is, he has to pass on the reduction in the rate of tax or benefit of input tax credit by reduction in prices to the consumer. Now, he does not pass on, that is about a second portion. If he fails to pass on the benefit, the Anti-Profiting Authority comes into existence and he passes an order. And he can do 4 different things. He can order reduction in prices. Then he can say, please return the amount which you did not pass on with 18% interest. But if he cannot find out the actual recipients, for example, the Domino's Pizza case, the one person who came, he will get 16 rupees, no problem. But hundreds of thousands of consumers across India would not have made a claim. Then he said, deposit 50% of the amount with 18% interest into the Consumer Welfare Fund of the center, and the balance 50% plus 18% interest on the State Consumer Welfare Fund. Then as originally enacted, he had the power to levy penalty with no further quantification. But as you saw, Section 3A has been introduced in 2019, which says it must be 10% of the amount profiteered, so that the authority does not run away with the imposing huge fines, etc. And even that will be applicable if you pay the amount within 30 days. Then, of course, there is a further thing. They could also cancel the registration of that particular person. It is still available under the law. So these are the 4 different actions which the National Anti-Profiting Authority can do in cases where you find a supplier has failed to adhere to Section 171. Now, how does a person go to the National Anti-Profiting Authority that he has been short-charged? Now, there are 2 possibilities I have discussed. Please see the top one. On the left-hand side, you'll see green one. The first possibility on top is application by an interested party, a commissioner or any other person. So, I am the actual person who has been charged extra, I can go. But they have so much of power for a commissioner of state or central tax also do, or any other person also, he can make a complaint to the standing committee. The standing committee, as you saw, was at the bottom of the thing. In between, the bottom was state level screening committee, which you see in the when the application possibility to application by interested party or a standing committee on issues of nature, local nature, which is not defined, the state level screening committee. The state level screening committee will put it to standing committee, or you can directly go to the standing committee. So these are the 2 options. And from the standing committee, it goes to the Director General of Anti-Profiteering, and he does the prima facie investigation and comes out and quantifies that amount, etc. Then he put forward his recommendation, etc., to the Anti-Profiting Authority, who then calls both the commissioner and also the party affected for a hearing. And after the hearing and the written submission, etc., he passes an appropriate order. I am not dealing with what are the time limits, 2 months, within 2 months, 6 months, etc. Those are available. The general thing is, apply to the state level screening committee, then go to the standing committee, then DGAP, and then to anti-profiting authority, or go straight to the standing committee, then go to the DGAP, and then go to the anti-profiting authority. These are the two methods in which a person who feels that section 171 has not been adhered to can get relief. So this is the procedure. Now, how long will section 171 remain? As I was pointing out to you, this is always considered to be a temporary measure. You remember, even under the Excise Act, on 28th of February, when you have the budget, you have any number of tax changes. Sometimes there will be reduction, sometimes there will be increase, etc. And whenever there is a reduction, there will always be an advice that it is felt that the industry will pass on the benefit, etc., to the consumer. But it was more like a recommendation and a pleading. But in GST, it is a statutorily provided requirement. But does that mean that every time you need to keep this provision will continue? Or when can you make an increase in the prices? First time you have found that in Pizza Hut, I made a problem in 320 rupees I increased, which is not warranted. But am I to remain at 300 forever? Am I not allowed to increase the price to 310, 320 or 330 at a later point of time? When am I allowed to? Those are the things which are not clear. That is because you are not trying to control the profit of the private enterprise through this mechanism. It is supposed to be a temporary measure till such time the GST settles down and the inflation, etc., are under control. Then you allow the private parties to make whatever profits or losses. They have to suffer both. It is not as if the government can control any of them. So initially, it was said that it will be for 2 years. That is coinciding with the period for which the anti-profiting authority was constituted. And now it has been extended by 2 more years by the GST Council in the 35th GST Council meeting. It is possible that this may continue to exist. That is why we say, is it forever? Because further reductions are possible in the GST, and whenever there is a reduction in GST, this could be triggered. And in 2017, the then Revenue Secretary always says, but somebody may also argue that there may be future changes in the tax rate also, and that at that time, this provision may have to be applied. But if you look at our service tax regime or in excise regime or in VAT regime, there are always increases in rate, reductions in rates, etc. But government did not control that the reductions, etc., should be absolutely passed on. If not, there will be a penalty. So according to me, this should definitely be a temporary measure, irrespective of other changes which may take place another 20 years down the lane. But this is supposed not to continue till that time. It is supposed to do till such time the GST settles, maybe 4 or 5 years and not beyond. But let us see how it goes in future. Now I will come to some few important cases just to see what type of evidence is being looked at and what types of decisions are handed out by the National Anti-Profiting Authority. Now, constitutional validity of the section and rules is also under challenge. We have 3 cases, the Hindustan Unilever, you saw they had for 400 and 500 crore demand. Jubilant Foodworks, I'm going to deal with some of these cases. Abbott Healthcare. Now, in all these cases, one is that there is a finding that under section 171, certain benefit has not been passed on, and an order has been issued confirming the amount of demand, and penalty proceedings are also in progress. And all these cases have gone to the Delhi High Court, and the division bench in all these cases granted a stay subject to deposit of certain sums of money, etc. Because in all those cases, there was also a challenge to the constitutional validity section and also the rules. And now, of course, the Supreme Court has transferred all these petitions to itself. And this transfer petition number, as you say, is 290 to 292 of 2020. So we'll still have to see how effective this is going to be, because major challenge is that you are violating the Supreme Court decision and not having any judicial person, and not even an involvement of a Supreme Court or a High Court judge, even in the selection of the members and also the chairperson. It is entirely done by the GST Council. So there is a very valid challenge to this particular thing. Similarly, under 171, whether even going into the profiting or loss, whether that would come under Article 19(1)(g) of the Constitution is also a major issue, I think, which is probably going to be determined in all these cases. And therefore, these transfer petitions, if and when they are heard, I think they will be a very, very interesting case which we will have in the future. Now, I'm taking you to some, see, Asian Paints 2018 in this case. Just read the facts simply. Assessee reduced the quantum of discount post introduction of GST and thereby did not pass on the benefit of reduction in rate of tax arising on account of introduction of GST. This is a fact. What has been held is reduction in discount does not amount to profiteering, as the same was offered for the profit margin by the respondent that not form part of the base price. Now, I think it's a very, very it's a high-level summary of this case. When you go into it and you get into the details, you will find that what has been concluded in this case is going to be contrary to some other cases which I'm going to deal later. Is totally different. Very simply put, the facts are the rates on paints was reduced from 18% to 12%, if I remember right, and Asian Paints increased the MRP of this particular paint from 2,610 rupees to 2,660 rupees. So there is a reduction in the rate of tax is not 18%. I'll just come to that. Excise plus service tax, VAT put together, it was 28.6%, and paints were chargeable to tax and GST 28. Therefore, there is a marginal reduction of just 0.6% in the GST regime as compared to that. Now, what has happened is when the prices increased from 2610 to 2660, there is a 50 rupees increase in prices. Now, what the authority holds is the reduction in the GST rate is only 0.6%. That, of course, is factual. Then they say the price has increased only by 0.24%. That is 4 rupees 50 paisa is what the price has increased, which is 0.24%, which is also very small. Therefore, there is no violation of Section 171. I'm going to show you another case where the authority says if you had an MRP of 2610 when it was 2860, then when the rate became 28, you must actually remove that MRP and print a revised lower MRP, and then you sell. That is when you would have fulfilled the requirements of Section 171. I'm going to deal with that case later. But in this particular case, they talked about the reduction as 0.6, and they did not look at the MRP. They looked at what was the price between the manufacturer to the distributor to the dealer and then to the final consumer. And there they saw the price increase was only 4.5 rupees, which is 0.24%, etc. And 0.6, 0.24, like that they compared and allowed that there is no profiteering in this particular case. But strictly, the way it would have been done is there is a reduction in rate of tax. Have you passed on? And whenever we talk about pass on, we are talking about pass on to the ultimate consumer, because in indirect taxes, the buck stops only with the consumer. It doesn't stop at all other places. It will get passed on to somebody else. It stops only with the consumer. But for the consumer, the price is 2660 MRP has increased. It is not decreased. Whereas they went by the intermediate, what was the price increase from the manufacturer to the dealer to the sub-dealer, and say that increase was only 4.5 rupees, which was 0.24% of some other base price they had. And they said there is no profiteering in this particular case. Whereas you are going to see another case exactly identical, except that it is a chocolate where an MRP is put and the rate was reduced from 18% to 12%. The intermediaries increased the base price to keep the MRP same, but the authority said, sorry, you have not passed on the benefit. The MRP should have been reduced under the Legal Metrology Act by applying a reduced rate along with the normal rate, and that is how you could have fulfilled Section 171. So Asian Paints was slightly differently decided at that particular point of time. Now you look at this particular case, Harish Bakers and Confectioners. Now, in this case, failure to pass benefit of reduced rate of GST from 28 to 18% in respect of Nestle Munch Nuts chocolate and the Cadbury Dairy Milk chocolate. This is exactly the same position as the Asian Paints, which I was pointing out. There was an MRP. The MRP did not change when the rate of tax reduced from 28% to 18%. But the intermediate prices of the various people were reduced in order to make the final MRP the same. But they held for the consumer the final price. If it was 35 rupees earlier, it is 35 rupees now, which means the 10% reduction has not been passed on. They said the MRP of the products remained the same before and after reduction of the rate of tax. The distributors increased the base price of the product into the rate change, and thus the assessee had to sell at the MRP to retain the same product. Although the final person, retailer, who sold to the consumer, he sold it only at the MRP price. And there they say, since assessee has failed to produce any evidence to show that he had taken up the issue of giving benefit of the reduced tax is concerned with the distributor. Therefore, what he says is, I am the consumer, Raghavan is the distributor, the retailer, and APS is the distributor. He says, Raghavan, you should have taken it up with APS and said, you must pass on a finally reduced rate. It cannot be at the same MRP, the MRP rate. Because you did not undertake, I'm not bothered about others, you will still have to suffer the 100 section 171. They said, assessee has failed to produce any evidence, show that he had taken up the issue of giving the benefit of reduced tax to his consumers with distributor. Therefore, it is quite apparent that he had deliberately charged the enhanced prices in intention to pocket the money which he was bound to pass on to the recipient. The argument that benefit could not be passed on as no benefit was received from the distributor and the profit margin being the same was not maintainable. Hence, the benefit of reduced rate of tax to be passed on to the consumer. Therefore, what has happened is, I earlier got it at 20 rupees and then I sold it at an MRP of 25. With the reduction, they increased my price to 21 and I still sold at 25 after 18%, which means my profit margin was the same. They say, I'm not concerned about your profit margin. The MRP remained the same. With reduction of 10% tax, MRP must have been reduced. In whatever chain of the supply chain you are, unless you produce evidence that you have taken it with us, you are still responsible. And of course, the big companies, obviously Nestle, etc., were also immediately investigated. And you saw the 90 crores, etc., for Nestle on my earlier slide. So it is everybody down the line, from the manufacturer to the distributor, to the sub-distributor, to the retailer, at every chain, you have to show finally the consumer gets the benefit. If the finally consumer has got the benefit, no problem. Intermediate, whatever you do, you can do it yourself, but you are not allowed to short charge the consumer. That's exactly what has happened in this particular case. You will now see exactly the contrary was held in Asian Paint. There MRP was revised and there was a reduction. Whether the reduction was 0.6 or 10% is irrelevant. The principle, I think it's irrelevant. The principle has undergone a change when you came to Harish Bakers and Confectioners. Now you come to the NP Foods. Now, in this case, the reduction in the rate is 18% to 5%. The restaurant services, which I was talking about earlier, 14/11/2017, with a condition that no ITC should be claimed. The assessee did not reduce the price of the products, that said, is he right in doing so? Obviously, the question is, the assessee increased the base price of his products to make good the loss which had occurred due to denial of input tax credit, GST reduction. So one is, yes, 18% got reduced to 5%. But I also lost input tax credit because 5% is subject to the condition I cannot take any input tax credit. They quantified it, said, I lost input tax credit of 11.8%. And I increased the base price of my product by 12.14%. So there's a marginal increase in average base price, and the reduction, the increase due to input tax credit is 11.8%. And therefore, they say the increase is commensurate with the increase in the cost of the product. Therefore, the allegation of not passing on the benefit of rate reduction is not established against assessee, is how they held. And again, it looks very, very simple when I talk about input tax credit denial is 11 point. How do I compute what was my input tax credit prior to this period, and how do I estimate what is the loss of input tax credit subsequent period? Some amount of assumptions are made. For example, in this particular case, from 1/7/2017, when GST was introduced, till 14/11/2017, when restaurant services was 18% input tax credit available, they found out what was the total input tax credit taken. divided it by the total turnover and found that it was 11.8%. And therefore they said, this is what I extrapolate that you would have lost going forward when the rate is reduced to 5%. And therefore, so long as your price increases are to the extent of 11.8%, section 171 is not attracted. If it is anything more, section 117 is attracted. In this case, it was marginal by 12.14. Therefore, probably considering the materiality, etc., they took a view that section 171 is not attracted in this particular case. A few more rulings are done. This Kunj marketing. This is Maggi. This is exactly like the Nestle case. There is a 35-gram Maggi pack, which had a MRP of 5 rupees, just 5 rupees. Now, what had happened in this case was, again, there is a reduction in the rate of tax from 18% to 12%. From again the same 15/11/2017, a lot of changes were made. It was 18 to 12. What this person did was kept the MRP at 5 rupees, but the intermediate price between the distributor and the retailer, which was earlier, I'll read 3.96 rupees, and with an 18%, it became 4.67. So he had a 33 paisa margin. That's what was for the 5 rupee thing. He had a 33 paisa margin. Now, because it became 12%, he increased the price at which he gives to the retailer at 4 rupees 17 paisa. With a 12%, it again became 4.67, which means the retailer continued to get the 33 paisa only. But the distributor to the retailer, he increased the price from 396 to 417, or you can say 21 paisa he increased. Now, in this case also, the authority held, no, MRP not having changed, the ultimate consumer had not got the benefit of a 6% reduction in the rate of tax. What happened in between is irrelevant, and therefore there is a section 171 violation. Then they argued, no, you can't look at it like this 35 grams. I have another packet called 70 grams, and I had given an enhanced set-off against that because he is talking about his price to the retailer. Therefore, he said to the retailer, I sell 35 grams, I sell 70 grams. I increased it in 35 but decreased in 70. In overall, I did not benefit, etc. Argument was made. They said no such adjustments are permissible under the CGST Act. I will look at each individual product line which is purchased by the consumer and whether he got benefit out of that or not. That was the singular objective with which is what done. Then they said profiteered in 35 grams by increasing base price when rate reduced from 18 to 12, MRP should have been reduced. So they say because MRP is inclusive of taxes, 5 rupees is inclusive of 18% tax. Therefore, if it is now 12 and not 18, 5 should have been reduced proportionately and a new MRP must be affixed. This is the argument of the authority which was held in this particular case. Similarly, when you come to Jubilant Foodworks, which is the Domino's Pizza case which I started off with, one of the arguments was, in a single invoice, I have multiple products. In some product, I increased the base price. In some product, I did not increase the base price. You should allow me to set off one against the other because to this individual consumer, I am selling against one single invoice. And that also, they said, no, even if it is a single recipient, the netting off of the benefits is not permissible. Product-wise, it must be on the product-wise and not with reference to invoice or any other measure. So again, in Jubilant Foodworks, this one. Now, all these are now questions before the Delhi High Court. How the profiteering should be controlled in the case of a particular person, whether it has to be with reference to each recipient, or it is the invoice, or it with the overall product lines, etc. How it should be determined is also a question which is before the Delhi High Court. All of them have been challenged. In the Hindustan Unilever case where we saw a huge demand, what they said was additional benefit was given to one recipient cannot be offset with denial of benefit to another recipient. So this is again a very tricky the way they argued. I as a distributor give it to 100 sub-distributors. You say I did not reduce the price to 40 people, but I reduced the price more than what is required in 60. You have to offset each together and do. Again, they said, what is this? That's all not permissible. We look only product. We only look at the product. And that is why HUL said we have 3,200 stock keeping units of various different products. Because if you take Maggi itself, I have 35 grams, I have 70 grams, I have 70 grams of 3 put together, I have 70 grams of 5 put together, I have 70 grams of 10 put together. Each one of them will have different MRP, different distributor price, etc. They said there are 3,300 stock keeping units. But authority said, I'm not concerned with all that. For all your products, you have an MRP. Whenever there is a reduction in the rate of tax, each of those products must have a commensurate reduction in MRP, whatever is already on the shelf. That is the type of thing which has been held in the HUL case. Now, in the Hardcastle restaurants, this again, it was held benefit to be passed on at the product level as recipient in each supply is different. So they held it wide, and they say whether the reduction rate is passed on by way of a commensurate reduction, it looks at one consumer and one recipient who purchases. Therefore, I should only one product is purchased by one recipient. Therefore, I should look at that. That product supplied to another recipient, whether he gets the benefit or not, it cannot be coupled with somebody else. Therefore, that is be done differently. But if that is so, for the same recipient, if I sell 5 different products in a single invoice, why should not the benefit of netting off be given? I think that is going to be contested in the earlier case we are talking about, Domino's Pizza. I buy a garlic bread, I also buy a medium crust pizza, and I also buy a softy ice cream, etc. All 3 of them. If in one of them I have decreased the price, one of them increased, but overall, if you look at it, with reference to all rates being reduced from 18% to 5%, if I did not benefit, to that individual, I had not short charged him. Is it correct to leave 2 items and only look at 1 item where a higher price has been charged? I think that's going to be a very major issue. But here is very interestingly, it was heard by 3 members of the NAPA. The order was signed by 4. So the Bombay High Court says, what is this? And he had set aside the order and sent it back. So this is what I was finding. Even today, you have situations where 4 people come and sit. You start arguing the case. One of them will go away. Then he will come back then another person will go away. He will come. You don't know who is hearing you, who is not hearing you, how they will be passing, etc. This used to happen in the Competition Commission also, which is also under challenge earlier. So this sort of a thing still keeps happening in these institutions. And then the last case I'm dealing the Pyramid Infratech. In this case also, this is with reference to real estate. This was under the input tax credit benefits on construction under Haryana Affordable Housing Policy 2013. So 36 applications were made to the screening committee saying that this builder had not passed on the benefit of input tax credit to us, and this was investigated. And one of the things which you were saying was there is, of course, a lot of increase in the prices of raw material, etc. Therefore, you should take those into account. But the authority said, you don't have a provision for price escalation, etc. in your agreement. And if you don't have an agreement, I cannot consider your price material, etc. Those are some things which you are supposed to observe. Those are independent of, have you got a benefit in input tax credit as compared to the previous regime? If so, what was that benefit? Quantify and pass it on. That is what is required. I cannot look into the price matter. Therefore, if there was a provision for price escalation and therefore the increase in price was responsible for the increase, whether they could have taken a different view, I really do not know. Because irrespective of the price increase, it could have allowed you to increase the prices and you may be allowed to apply a tax rate of 12 or 18 on that, it's fine. But if you're talking about input tax credit, etc., if the prices of the raw materials increased, if the input tax credit also increased, so there is a lot of interplay. What is really happening is we are trying to simplify a very, very complex situation, which I'm going to talk about next. Is we don't bother about it is what we for ease of purposes in chartered accountants exams you say ignore taxation. In real life, you can never ignore taxation. Similarly, we say ceteris paribus, all other things remaining constant. Nothing remains constant. Everything keeps varying. So it becomes a very, very complicated process. But in this particular case, they took the easier route saying you did not have any price escalation clause for raw material. Therefore, you cannot bring in a factor for trying to say whether you will pass on or how much you will pass on or how much you will not pass on, we cannot get into those questions. So these again are a very a sample of a few case laws from the NAPA rulings. As I said, most of them are under appeal in different courts on the various methodologies followed. On the constitutional validity of Section 171 and also the constitution of the authority without any judicial intervention and a judicial member, that is before now the Supreme Court. Now, therefore, this is a very important area for I think lawyers. Even though the NAPA is situated in Delhi, your client may be in Chennai, then you do have a lot of role to play in determining or reducing, if there is a benefit, what the DGAP will calculate, what you want to calculate, how it should be calculated. I think each one of that is a potential area for lawyers to enter. Now, the other thing which I wanted to do was the issues under anti-profiteering. I know it's about 5:52, another 8 minutes before I stop at questions. But very quickly, I will put all the common issues I put in one slide, even though there are a few more slides coming in. In this case, what we are taking, can the concept of demand and supply be disregarded? One, difficulty to establish one-to-one correlation between ITC and tax payable on outward supplies. Now, there are also a lot of contingencies in relation to input tax credit. The other person should pay you, he should pay the tax, then only you will get it in electronic credit ledger, otherwise you will not. Can all these things be disregarded? Whether gradual increase in profit margins, the recent pros, be considered while computing the anti-profiteering. Now, sometimes I don't determine the price. The price is determined by an industry leader and a competitive prices. For example, you take any type of plastic, polypropylene plastic, polyethylene, terephthalate. If Reliance sets the price, everyone has to follow. No one has any capacity to fix the price. So if they fix a particular price and I have to follow that particular price, will I be found fault for not having passed on the benefit? Because all that they look at is there a reduction in rate? Yes. What was your rate before the reduction and what is your rate after? If there is any difference, then I am going to take up. That is how the entire thing works up. But for example, every month, Reliance will come with a price saying these are the indicative prices for various types of plastic. Almost all the people in the industry will follow that particular price, and there will be still further negotiation for a further reduction because you are a long-standing consumer, I don't want to lose the business, etc. But these are again problems which are there. Now, whether the benefit needs to be passed on to the consumer when the registered supplier is incurring a loss. Right in 2017, when it started off, this question came. They say, I'm selling it at an MRP of, or let's say not even an MRP, I'm selling it at a price of 300 rupees and I am making a loss of 25 rupees. Now, because of the reduction in GST, I'm increasing my price a little and the 30 rupees loss, I am reducing it to 20 rupees. This is not permitted. The authority says, you were suffering a loss before GST, you suffer the loss after GST also. Because of the reduction on rate, I cannot allow you to reduce your loss, or I cannot allow you to transform your loss into a profit. You need to pass on the particular benefit. Now, the question therefore is, how long should I retain the price at the same level? Okay, tomorrow the rate of tax is reduced to 12%. Therefore, as compared to today's rate, tomorrow's rate also should be the same, only the tax will be a lower amount and the total amount to the consumer will low. But can I not increase the price on 1st May? Can I not increase on 1st June? When can I increase? When can I not increase? Now, those are questions which are unanswered. And that is where you have the problem of all this concept of, we talk about demand, supply, correlation, contingency, so many different things are there. Therefore, it becomes what you never used to have documentation in your company, how your prices are increased. It may be decided by top 3 people and then communicate to distributor, okay, increase this price, etc. But now, because of this anti-profiting measure, one thing is clear. As soon as there is a reduction in rate or as soon as there is an increase in input tax credit, you must ensure that you pass on the benefit. But thereafter, maybe after 15 days or 30 days, build up your case as to why the prices should go. Raw material prices have increased, this has increased, cost of borrowing has increased. You have internal documents which are created to show that is how the price is being set up. having approved by a higher authority, and keep that as a document in order to show to the authority that you did pass on the benefit, start with, but things don't remain the same. They have changed. Here are the changed circumstances which warranted an increase in the price. And then see whether the authority accepts. If not, of course, challenging that will be what we require. So there are a number of issues. The issue as put in section 171 and as applied, it doesn't seem to be that simple. Now you also have problems. Whether this 171 will override the contract which you have already entered into. See, if it is a contract with tax extra, no problem. Whatever is the tax, you do. But if it is a tax inclusive contract, and suppose you do not have any new legislation or new tax issues incorporated in agreement, if it is a tax inclusive contract and you have bid and got it on the basis of 28%, and because 18% it has now become during the supply, at the time when you supply it has become 18, even though it is a tax inclusive contract and the other person asked you to pass on the reduction. It looks like this law will override whatever you have in the contract. So the other person may ask for a reduction. So these are the types of questions where even the over contracts are being overridden. So what is happening is, of course, B2C is a different issue. B2B, business to business, most of the time because they have a continuous relationship, they normally try to discuss and a little give and take takes place. So even though benefit may be 100, so long as you pass on 80 and keep 20, etc., nobody may go to the complaint. But still, the commissioner or any other person can still go, even though the two involved parties cannot go. So that's again, like some people can meddle if they want. Suppose you are in a company and you are sent out, you find this is what's happening. Whether you go and do a whistleblowing, whether they will start investigating and still come back after you, even though the person to whom you supplied had not made a complaint, that again remains to be tested. Similarly, what I pointed out, the supplier's cost, whether it can be set out. Earlier I said 100 rupees the reduction in tax, but there is also an increase in your expenditure. Therefore, can I pass on only 60 or 100? That depends on the circumstances. You will have to show every time there is an increase in expenditure, how did you pass on that expenditure, or you absorb that expenditure you might have to produce in order to get it. Yeah. Similarly, these are again, you saw the construction sector, 8% ITC to 1% for affordable and 12% to 5% without ITC for other residential projects, and restaurant services I talked about. Very quickly, last two slides. International background, I had told you about Malaysia and Australia when I started. So it is not a provision which is new or special to India. I'm always tempted to quote Sherlock Holmes, of whom I'm a very great admirer. In Sherlock Holmes stories, he used to say, my dear Watson, there is nothing new in this world. Everything has happened somewhere at some point of time. It is a question of having knowledge about it. It's about this anti-profiting, just like what we have. For everything, there's a case law. And Mr. Sridhar used to tell me when I joined him, when I used to do things on first principle, he always said, Parthasari sir, you have to drop all that idea. You cannot even presume that sun rises in the east. If possible, please find a judgment of Supreme Court which says sunrise in the east, it will be better. You cannot presume even that. So for everything, you must have an authority. So here when I found that you have Malaysia, Australia, which I pointed out, what is interesting, of course, is in the Malaysian thing, we don't have much time today, there is a separate price control and anti-profiting act of 2011. There they recognize that you may not be able to look at one transaction in isolation and then determine that there is a profiting or not. Because a business undergoes a lot of changes over a period of time, it is important to arrive at some sort of an average and then determine whether you have made more than that average profit or not. So they always try to determine it with reference to a period prior to the GST introduction and the period after introduction, and trying to eliminate the type of extraordinary items, etc., and then try to determine, have you made a net margin of 8% Now, after the reduction in GST, is your margin 8% or 14%, etc.? Then I will determine whether there is a profiteering by you. So they had a slightly far more complicated provision, a separate act called the Price Control and Anti-Profiteering Act. There they talked about the margin percentage mechanism. Similarly, in Australia, the Competition Commission inquires into that for monitoring the prices 12 months before the commencement of GST, and then after that they try to determine whether there is a reasonable case for anti-profiteering or not. And that is probably my last slide. Just say price exploitation, whether the profit is unreasonable. That's why they say earlier you made a certain profit, whether the profit is unreasonably high. There are different regulating authorities, and the period is 3 years. In Malaysia, it is now continuing upwards. After 2018 also, they're still continuing. And in Malaysia, you have even an imprisonment, a criminal penalty in addition to the civil penalty. Unlike in Australia and India also, of course, we have only a civil penalty. So there are international practices based on this anti-profiteering provision has come into existence. And it has, of course, run its course now, throwing up a lot of problems. And I think it will be very interesting to see how the High Court and other courts look at some of these methods by which the DGAP and the NAPA have determined the anti-profiteering. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Now, of course, it's open for questions. I think I completed exactly about 2 minutes late, 6:02. Now it's open for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. It was a very wonderful presentation, sir. And I think we've already got a lot of messages from our participants stating how good the presentation was, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now I request the participants whoever has questions to kindly raise your hands or send me a message so that we can put forth to Parthasarathy sir and he can answer our questions. So Aditya Reddy sir has a question. I'll just unmute him.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, sir. Thanks a lot, sir, for the presentation, sir. So just
Thank you. Yeah.
Some of the orders, sir, which even you had mentioned, especially with respect to the construction industry, there was they actually attempt to compare the ITC with the pre-GST and the post-GST. That is during the VAT regime, the computation of ITC and the present ITC after the GST. Now, of course, considering the, like you said, the contingent requirements for ITC are different under the GST regime. Also, several other aspects of the legal regime are different. But you think they were right in comparing, sir, the ITCs under the pre-GST regime and the post-GST regime?
See, whether the comparison can be made, whether the comparison is correctly made is a different question. That requires going into the facts of the case, but that is exactly because in all real estate projects, as you know, they are not at a lot of time-consuming projects. A lot of them commenced before the GST, but continued and got completed after the GST. And the pyramid infrastructure case which I was talking about and the Haryana affordable housing was one such case where they talked about that because it was a work contract, they were getting VAT tax credit also at that point of time. Therefore, they were trying to compare what was the benefit of input tax credit as on 30/6/2017 that you enjoyed, and vis-a-vis what is the input tax credit benefit which you are now going to enjoy post 1/7/2017, to make a comparison whether there has been an extra benefit in input tax credit. If so, they have gone on the basis that should be passed on. And like I said, one of the ways they have determined is the total input tax credit which you got before 30/6/2017, they taken it to the numerator. For the denominator, because you don't have a turnover, what they did was, what were all the various installments you collected before 30/6/2007 for various stages, for plinth, for this, for that, etc., and divided it to get an average ratio to compare with post-GST to see how it increased or decreased. That's how they have done that. Yeah.
Yes, I understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Before we go on to the next question, I request everyone, whoever wants to ask a question, to kindly turn on your video also so that it will be easy to communicate rather. Yes, may I request Joseph sir, I think has a question. Joseph sir? Joseph sir, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this is basically for consumer product only.
Why do you say, sir?
No, is there, because the whole scheme looks like that.
Yeah,
My query is,
definitely.
it is not, no, the reading of it is that there's no restriction or prohibition for other persons also the supply.
Yeah.
But largely, if you see the wording, it looks as if it is for the FMCG or consumer goods, basically. So that is the one. Whether my understanding is right, sir?
You are right. When you look at it, the most of the thing is what they when do you get into inflation? The ultimate level of the prices, etc., increase. You get into inflation. That's why they wanted to control this. Yes, is definitely at the ultimate level. But while the effect of it, when you see with Nestle or HUL, etc., will be with reference to fast-moving consumer goods. The
Yes,
fact
sir.
remains that even with reference to infrastructure projects, etc., they're taking. And as I said, it need not necessarily be only a complaint from the consumer. It can also be at the instance of the commissioner or any other person. It probably gives them the right to investigate whether in a particular case should have been passed. Normally, according to me, they would not go into that. If the two people who are involved are happy with the arrangement, they may not get into that. I don't think that has happened today. But a reality project, definitely all real estate projects have come into the scrutiny of NAPA. So there also you can still say it is consumer in the sense the person who purchased the flat, he is affected, therefore he has gone on a complaint. You can say it to that extent, yes. Maybe as of now, 99.9% cases are made on consumer complaints or where the consumer has not got the benefit passed on. B2B, as I said, I have also had cases where people discuss and then they try to sort out and then take the benefits from one another based on their own calculations, etc., and settle the issue. They have not gone out. Yeah.
That's precisely, sir. We are now looking for a paint or some television or some food product. Typically, whether BHL supplying some transformer to some L&T or something, whether L&T could still be considered as consumer and whether they could complain.
They could. If there is a problem,
yes,
and they want to complain, they could definitely complain. Yes, definitely.
No, on the assumption that there is a problem. So
correct.
It is not restricted to individuals who are consumers, but also corporate or probably.
Yes. Correct, because we talk about the recipient, and if that recipient did not get, he in turn gets that. If you see the cases where we had I talked about the distributor, sub-distributor. The sub-distributor said, I did not get any reduction, so I did what my correct. They said, I'm not bothered about you. Therefore, when the transformer is supplied to me, if I don't get the benefit, finally it gets into the tax in the rate of electricity, which finally goes to the consumer. Somewhere finally the buck stops only with the consumer. So to that extent, I think it is still possible if there is a dispute. That is, if the parties agree and settle, no problem. Otherwise, if they go, there is no bar in section 171 that cannot be looked at.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
May I call upon Shafiq, sir? Shafiq, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir. Shafiq, sir. Can you please turn on your video, sir, if possible, so that it will be. Yes, sir. You can go ahead.
Yeah, but my video is not getting.
Then no problem, sir.
I'm seeing you. I'm seeing you, Mr. Shafiq.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, sir. How are you, sir?
Fine.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your time, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, I have one fundamental question, a couple of questions. Anti-profiteering. Is there any basis to have this kind of limitations? Because it is essentially for me to decide what is the kind of profit that I'm going to have.
Yeah.
Now, because there is a reduction in the rate of tax, how does it matter? Even without a reduction in the rate of tax, I could have still chosen to say, let me assume that there is a profit of 10% today. Tomorrow, I could have said, let me make a profit of 20% or 15%. Now, merely because there is a reduction in the rate of tax, should it have a bearing on my right to make a profit? I don't know. I missed out on the first 10 minutes. I don't know if you have already raised it because there was some difficulty logging on.
No, I did not deal with that, but definitely the issue is that is exactly what we are pointing out. See, the whole concept seems to be, as I said, when GST is introduced, the world over the experience is that there is an inflation which had affected the political parties in position in getting re-elected in the next year. Therefore, all of them had put this type of thing to ensure control, but that's was supposed to be 2 years. But the answer to your question is yes. Actually, if it is a free enterprise, the government does not determine whether you make a profit or a loss. If you make a profit, how much? If I made a profit 100 times and next time I am in doldrums, the government does not have to bother about me. I'll just give you only one illustration of my experience. When we had, there's an anti-dumping law. Okay, in the anti-dumping law, if certain goods are dumped, you can levy a customs duty equal to the margin of dumping or less. The WTO law says it can be equal to the margin of dumping or less. When you go to the United States says it will be equal to the margin of dumping. When it comes to European Union and India, we adopted the or less. We adopted this on the ground. The domestic industry which is affected by dumping is in India. The people who are importing those dumped goods and using them are also in India. So both of them are forming part of the same economy. I want to balance the rates between them. Therefore, even if the margin of dumping is $100, if I find $50 is sufficient to remove the injury to the domestic industry, I will put it. So I asked this question to the United States Trade Representative, why are you not having this type of measure? Why are you sticking to the dumping? And he told me, Partha, in United States, we don't regulate the way in which private enterprise do things. If they are making a profit, they are making a profit. If they are making a loss, they cannot come to me and cry, I will not do. Therefore, I have said, if there is a dumping and there is a margin of dumping, I will protect you to the extent of margin of dumping. I am not bothered about my other constituent of the domestic industry who is importing and using it. So I think it is basically the economic philosophy. But in India, what we are trying to do is, because I am implementing something new, that something new, I don't want that to create an additional problem for me. So temporarily, I want this to be done. That is why I said, what is the cutoff date? Is it within 2 days, 3 days? Or after 1 month, can I increase the price or not? I think those are important questions which will be addressed with reference to facts of each case. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Sir, we have 5 questions in line now, sir. With your sir's permission, can we move on to the next one, sir?
Yeah, please.
So, Sundareshwaran, sir.
Yes, sir. Hello.
Yes,
sir, good evening. Good evening, sir. Sundareshwaran.
Sir, namaskaram.
Namaskaram, sir. Solunga, sir.
ரொம்ப நல்லா இருந்தது.
Thank you, sir.
Actually, the pyramid infratech the facts are that he made the books of accounts was not maintained properly, and so they found out that there is a profit in violation by him. But Act the section 171 is the enabling section. Yeah, as per section 171, it doesn't extend to the period before the GST was introduced. It cannot be also.
Correct.
How did the authority came to conclusion that there was violation?
No, as you rightly said, and I also saw in my third slide, there are 2 such situations. One is pre-GST or post-GST and within GST. Okay. So what they went is with reference to what had happened in the pre-GST regime, what you are getting and what you are trying, because the application, all the 36 people, the complaint was the input tax credit was not being passed on. Therefore, they took into account what was the input tax credit pre-GST under the VAT, what were you getting, etc., and what you are getting in the post-GST, and then trying to determine. You are right in some ways. If you read many of the judgments, it's very, very difficult to understand the facts and sometimes the conclusions. Like if you read the Asian Paints and then you read the next one with reference to that Foods case, NP Foods case, you will find totally contradictory things are coming out. Of course, that depends probably how the DG AP appreciates and puts up his recommendation to the NAPA. But in this case, it is purely on input tax credit.
உங்க ஒபினியன் பிரகாரம் தப்பு இல்லையா? அதுதான் மேடம் இருக்கு.
Yes, sir.
உங்க ஒபினியன் பிரகாரம் அவ பண்ணது தப்பு. It cannot extend to the pre-GST period.
It can, sir. Why will it not? If there is what we are doing is you are having a cutoff as 1.7, and the law says if there is an increased benefit due to the input tax credit. Therefore, if you find that the input tax credit earlier was 100 and now it is 105, there is an increased benefit, then 5 rupees should be passed on. That is what a simplicity of section 171 is about. Therefore, they are trying to find out what was the benefit you are getting earlier and what was the benefit you are getting now. That is how they were estimating it.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Muthuraman, sir.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Please, sir. Yes.
Good evening, Uttaraman.
Sir, I have a small doubt. So, the benefit contemplated under section 171, should we have to pass on the benefit only by way of corresponding reduction in my price? Or if the seller and buyer agrees, I supply him an extra quantity, increased quantity, and say that I comply with section 171, that I have passed on the benefit. So long as my buyer agrees that whatever extra quantity is supplied is for complying with the 171.
This question also had come up, but then it all depends on the facts of to whom did you give the additional. As in FMCG, if I am the distributor and you are the retailer, and then you sell it to the ultimate consumer, let us say. If between the two of us we agree for this, I will give you an extra volume, and instead of giving a reduction of 100 rupees, I'll give you 2 packets extra. But if you continue to sell the 102 packets at the same price to others, the benefit has not been passed on. So whether this was done, if I was the ultimate consumer, you did not reduce the price, but you tell instead of 2, I'll give you 3 for the same price. And if the third free was compensating for the reduction of rate, according to me, it should be absolutely fine. So it becomes very, very factual determination in that particular scenario.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Balaji, sir.
Yes, sir. Sir, I have a few doubts. First,
Sir.
and you had mentioned more than once that short charged. I somehow missed. I thought it is excess charged is what is the matter for complaint. Since you mentioned more than once, I don't know whether I have missed anything.
No. Short charging is really overcharging the consumer. That is, it is more like in Yamathin சொல்றதுக்கு you use the word. That's all.
Sorry, I'm sorry. My understanding was. My apologies.
Okay,
Well,
no
that's
problem.
one. Second thing is, does the person who makes the complaint has got any role after the complaint is made, or he makes the application?
Actually, what has happened is many of those complaints originate from the individual. After giving the complaint to the committee, he has actually vanished. He did not even appear or do. Everything has been done by the commissioner on his behalf. The other party, of course, appeared. So most of the time, the individuals never came into that. They lodged the complaint, and probably they got back the 20 or 30 rupees, and other hundreds of crores went into the consumer welfare fund. But there is absolutely no bar in his participating. But I find that because individuals cannot travel from Kerala to Napa, etc., they have not gone.
Even if they are to do, what sort of facts that they can throw more?
They cannot. That is why they say, I give you a prima facie case. To me, this is what happened. You examine. Then they open up all the books of the other person and keep going. That's how it is. Yeah.
Fine, sir.
Thank you, sir. Goka Narration, sir.
Hello, sir. Thank you very much for having made to enrich our knowledge, sir. Hello.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
So my question is, sir, suppose if my price is 100 plus tax, forget about MRP time being, my price is 100 plus tax. There will not be any problem in respect of the rate changes.
Correct. Right? Absolutely. Correct,
only in the case of input tax credit is given fresh, or that's only point to be taken in that case.
Correct.
Second is, suppose if I have to make a lot of accounts, data to submit to the department to prove that there is no anti-profiting, all these things. Would it lead to exposing my cost and the business secret to the department officers and the third party, all these things? What is the mechanism for me to, safe mechanism for me to keep my business secrets? Because it will note my competitors if I give all the cost records, all these things, number one. Second, another point is, the chartered accountant who signs the 9C return, when they file the annual return, the chartered accountant is signing the 9C returns. They have to make any report on the return about this aspect. It is also the role to audit such anti-profiting activities also. There is no guidelines. Is there any guidelines from the CA Institute or CMA Institute as to how to maintain the accounts, all these things, sir? And these are all the few questions on me, sir, on you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, as I understood two questions. The first one, I would say, yes, a lot of information is collected by the DGAD, right from your profit and loss accounts to all your trial balances, everything is taken into account, I know that. And if you see the rule provision, just like you have in anti-dumping, anti-subsidy and safeguard investigation, there is a provision for protection of confidential information. So when you give the confidential information, it is information which is given confidentially only to the Director General of Anti-Profiteering. It is not to be disclosed to the other side, irrespective of whether he appears or not. It is not to be disclosed. The confident, and you only given what we call as a non-confidential summary if the other party wants of what you have submitted in confidence. The only question for which I don't have an answer is how far is this information secret with the government officers? I cannot answer that. That is what the question is being asked of me in anti-dumping also. But for that, this provision exists. Like what we are having even in now the Supreme Court, the confidentiality club, if you are talking about certain licensing agreements, when I had issues on standard essential patents, where I had charged a royalty rate which is commensurate with all others, I don't want to disclose how many people I have royalty agreement on what terms, then it is given on a confidential basis to the judge and also only to the lawyer on the other side, and then they only share that information and it does not go to the client. So you have a provision like that for confidentiality of the documents and information. So to that extent, there is a safeguard available in the rules. As far as your second question, I don't have an answer. If on anti-profiteering under Section 9C, you are specifically making an averment as a chartered accountant, having examined that you are not anti-profited, etc. And if still there is a complaint, I think the DGAP has an overriding where it comes there. And if there is a discrimination or difference between the two, what are the actions to be taken? I don't know. But irrespective of the signing of the certificate by the chartered accountant, if there is a complaint and the standing committee and screening committee decide that the prima facie evidence, they can ask the DGAP to investigate and he can investigate notwithstanding the certificate.
But there is no provision in the 9C the format to make such certificate by the chartered accountant.
That's what I would say, because sir, there's a statutory provision to an authority to do that. Maybe they don't. If they want to go by the charter, like for we have unjust enrichment, we don't have any specific statutory provision. But we say I give a certificate charter account, say it is not passed on. This has been kept in the books of account as receivable from the customers. It has not been charged to the cost, etc. We say these are methods by which you prove because there is no prescribed procedure. Whereas in 171, because it is prescribed and there is an authority established for the purpose, I think maybe the chartered accountant need not look into it. The authority will look into it based on any complaint at that point of time.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, with in addition to this query, sir, Saravanan sir just wants to add on that GST audit report in form GSTR 9P is a reconciliation statement only, so need not be reported, sir. He just wanted to add on this.
Okay. Thank you. Right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Saravanan sir. Sir, next question is Karthik sir.
Sir, thank you for the excellent presentation.
Karthik sir, if you can start your
Thank
video.
you.
Yeah, so the question I had is, what is the nature of anti-profiteering? It doesn't seem to be in the nature of a tax. And constitutionally, where do you get the power to levy anti-profiteering from? Because both the states and centers are levying it. I don't think it comes from 246A. Therefore, what is its nature actually?
Yeah, if you are looking at something like, see, the fact that if the amount is not given to the recipient, it goes to the consumer welfare fund suggests that it is unjust enrichment as against the ultimate recipient. So while we may have a very specific provision in the unjust enrichment, etc., we say that in the refund provision, we incorporate in both excise, customs service tax, etc., that it has not been passed on, then it will be repaid, or then it will be credited to the consumer welfare fund. You may not have them. That's probably one of the things which is under challenge as to why 171 itself is constitutionally not valid. Apart from 19(1)G, I think this is also one of the points is involved. Whereas under the rules only, we are talking about judicial person not being involved. So this is also an issue which will be adjudicated, I think, by the Supreme Court.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sir, with your permission, sir, 3 more questions, sir. We'll end the session after that.
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
The next question is from Vishwanathan, sir. Vishwanathan, sir?
Yes, I'm there.
Sir, good evening.
Good evening, Patsadi sir. Excellent presentation.
Thank you, sir.
But I had a bird's eye view of this provision for the first time, I must honestly admit. And a lot of questions have already come in. While also I feel that the constitutional provisions to bring in this provision into effect is necessary for a challenge, and I'm very hopeful that courts may interfere in these matters. I just want to understand from you one thing, sir. You are aware of this unjust enrichment provision, and you have dealt with also. There was an excise provision 12B which says presumption of passing on and requirement to indicate in the invoice that service tax or whatever excise duty has been collected should be indicated so that there is a presumption available for the department to go into it. Now, in an anti-profiteering, the MRP does not indicate what is the amount of GST charge or anything like that.
Correct.
Now, what basis they presume just because I had a price on 1/7/2017 and there was some rate of tax which normally would have gone into that price and there is a reduction on price, the department is presuming that I passed on the tax when actually it is the onus of the department to prove that the amount of reduction in tax has already been passed on by virtue of that sale. Is it not the onus on the department, or should the assessee go and prove it? This is my question.
The way I would look at it is, for example, there are different types of cases. Those MRP type of cases, I would say the presumption is automatically in favor of the department, saying that on 30/6/2017, if you had an MRP of 100 and the tax was 28, on 1/7 if the tax is 18 and the MRP remains there, then they say you under legal methodology also you are allowed to reduce the MRP and show it independently separately from the normal MRP, cutting it out and show it there. Therefore, by keeping the same MRP, there is a presumption that you have not passed on the benefit under section 171. So that is all. But unlike, see, if you look at the evolution of unjust enrichment, you know, it started off with the CAG's report again saying that refunds are being taken by people even though it is all passed on to the consumer. Then, of course, you start incorporating it in the refund provision, saying that this is how it will be done. You don't have a similar corresponding provision in the refund provision or anything. You have it with reference to refund, but with reference to passing on of, because the reduction of, you don't have very specific, only 171 is there. That is why when Karthik said this, I said this is also one of the points which is there before the Supreme Court. But here, if you are talking about a burden, etc., the initial burden is discharged by the person who complains by simply pointing out the day before I got it at 318%. Now it is 320 and 5%. Therefore, prima facie, he has not passed on the benefit. Therefore, you are examining the question by coming to you whether 300 to 320 increase was permitted by any other act, your raw material price increase or something, etc., is what they are trying to examine. And I said it will become very, very difficult to prove on the cutoff date if there are increases and decreases will break. But 1 month down the lane, you may be able to justify easily by creating adequate audit trail to show that because of increase in thing, or you are already suffering a loss, therefore you need to increase the price in order to reduce the loss or make it a profit. You may have a separate documentation. But within a week or 10 days of change of these rates, etc., according to me, it will become very difficult. People have to be very careful at that point of time.
No, my one more question is, calling this as a profit is a misnomer according to me, because supposing a company is not accounting any profit, why do you call this profit? It's an independent right of the businessman to do business, you know. He cannot suffer loss all the time. He has to arrange his business in such a way.
So that's why I had another slide which I did not use. What is profit and what is profiteering? And there is a very thin line of difference. I put it there, but I took it out. I did not bring it. But here, we don't go into any technical meaning, because section 171 uses the term as if it is an anti-profiteering. And if you do not pass on the reduction in rate by a commensurate reduction in prices, you are profiteering. That extent is, that's all that they talk. So they don't go into that question. That is why I'm saying, when they said, I was suffering a loss, therefore I increased the prices and reduced the loss, they said you are suffering a loss before GST. I don't want you to use GST to reduce your loss and get you a profit. I want you to pass on immediately. That is why I've said all these are the difficult areas in the first 1 month of any chain. Thereafter, I think you should be able to build adequate evidence to show that your price increases are for various commercial reasons which are permitted. But correctly, as Mr. Shafiq also asked this question, whether government or anybody should regulate at all the profits or losses of private enterprise, I think it's an economic question, policy question. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Krishnanand, sir. Krishnanand, sir.
Prithvi, can you
Dr.
hear me?
Krishnanand, sir.
Prithvi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm able to hear you, sir. Good evening.
Good evening, sir. How are you, sir?
Fine, fine, sir. Tell me, sir.
Thank you very much for your fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
A small question with regard to one of the case laws you referred to. Out of 4 members, only 3 members had signed. 4 members signed where only 3 members were present. Coming and going. So is it a regular feature in the profiteering authority? If so, my question is, why not all proceedings of the profiteering authority be recorded in camera? Because it is going to be your affidavit against the affidavit of the authority. And court cannot decide on whims and fancies or assumptions and presumptions that somebody was present and somebody was not present.
Correct. Sir, two answers. The general example I gave, some committee members coming and sitting, was my experience in Competition Commission. As far as the NAPA is concerned, this was the one case where actually it was heard only by 3 people. But when the order came, it was signed by the 4th person. And that was pointed out as one of the important items, and the Bombay High Court set aside on that particular ground. Yes, what I am saying is it's such a fundamental judicial principle. If we have to go to a court and get the order set aside for that, I think it speaks very low of our the way in which the various tribunals are functioning. NAPA is an important authority. He should be guided by some legal person who should say that you can't do this. And any case, the quorum is 3. So 3 were present. So they could have signed that agreement, signed and done it. I think that's one of the things which lacking. And probably if there is a deputy legal advisors, maybe the authorities may not even listen because they are not used to.
So have you taken this issue up with them?
No, I think this has been pointed out. I think it's not happening. But as you said, this was one case which could come. But most of the time, out of the 5, if all 5 are present, or 4 or 3 is the minimum quorum, whoever is present, I think they are ensuring that they are present fully and hearing the order and passing the orders now.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the last question for the evening, sir. Shafiq, sir, again.
Yeah.
Shafiq, sir. Shafiq, sir, can you hear me? So I think we've lost Shafiq.
Yeah, okay.
So one. So I think we are done with all the questions, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much again for all of you for giving me this opportunity to be with the Madras Bar. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure. And I consider it an honor that you have permitted me to speak on this subject, and that too on a Sunday evening and so many people present. I think it's a great honor. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great job, sir. Thanks for
Thank you very much, sir, for this wonderful presentation, sir. Because of your presentation, even on a Sunday evening, 100 participants have come today with all enthusiasm, sir, to learn from you.
Absolutely. Yes.
To make this complicated topic into a more simplified one, sir. Thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank all the participants to join us today. We will keep having these sessions every day at 5 p.m. We'll keep posting the sessions as early as we can. A round of applause for our speakers for tonight and for all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Bye. I'm stopping. Huh? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm ending the meet. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.